Welcome to This Organized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Lori Palau, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I am your host, Lori Palau. And if you're watching us on YouTube, I recorded this, or we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. So if you see why I'm wearing a green t-shirt, it is because it is St. Patrick's Day. And but it is now, if you're listening to it in real time, we're in June. And so hopefully in real time, I have a better tan than I do right now. But I am very excited for this episode. I have been waiting to have these two guests on for the longest time. So as you may know, if you listen to last week's episode, we're doing a summer series of Enneagram and clutter. And if you're new to our show and you're not familiar with the stuff that we've been doing, the Enneagram's a personality framework that looks at your motivation versus your behavior. And there's 9 different core types. And I have spent the past several years working on kind of connecting the dots between the intersection of what your personality type is and how it relates to clutter. And it's been a really fun project for myself and extremely helpful for my clients, my fellow professional organizers. And so I'd done a series a while back on it when I had first started scratching the surface in this area. But I wanted to do it again because it was so popular the first time. And so I have a whole new lineup of guests. We're going to be working our way through each Enneagram type and interviewing people with those specific characteristics and talk to them about their experience and how they interact with clutter. Are they like controlling with clutter? Are they clutter blind? How do they relate to clutter in all aspects of their lives? And so you are in for a treat because my guests today are like a dynamic duo. And for many of my fellow professional organizers, you will know them as the creators and leaders of Pro Organizer Studio. My friend Jen Kilbourne Obermeyer created the Inspired Organizer on digital course, and she's going to talk about that, and has since grown into this incredible online community that she co-runs with Melissa Klug, who is an amazing, amazing talent in her own right. And I love these women because they are leaders in the industry. They empower other women. They help people live simply, work smarter, which is what we do. And I think it's a great example. And we've said this before, we've been on each other's shows, that you can have several people in the same industry and really play nice in the sandbox. And so these women are colleagues of mine. I look up to them. I look to them for advice, and I think it's mutual. And so when I asked them both if they would be guests on my show to talk about their own Enneagram types, they jumped at the chance. So I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my two dear friends, Melissa Klug and Jen Kilbourne Obermeyer, to the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. I love talking about this. I'm so excited.
All right. So I just gave our listeners some backstory, and obviously you guys can fill in the blanks along the way. We do, as you know, have a lot of other professional organizers who listen to our show. So most of them are familiar with you because you guys are leaders in the industry. But if you guys could just, for those who might not be familiar with Pro Organizer Studio or the work that you do, can you just in your own words tell each of you, what are you poking at?
I'm pointing at Melissa.
Oh,
I'm going to let her do our official intro.
Okay. So I will let everyone know. So, and you'll be able to quickly, if you're listening to the podcast, you'll be able to tell because Jen has a nice little Southern twang because she's a South Carolina girl. And Melissa's a Midwesterner. So you'll be able to have a distinction in their vocal tones. But just tell our listeners a little bit about what you guys do collectively, and then a little bit about each one of you from the personal side of things. Melissa, I'll let you kick it off.
Yes, I just have the blank newscaster voice that doesn't really have any accent. So you'll know it's me.
That's so funny.
So Jen started Pro Organizer Studio back in 2016, and it has grown into this absolutely amazing community of women. And I have a corporate background. And so I've talked a lot about, I came from industries that were mostly men. And so it's been so fun to me to now work in an industry that is mostly women. And that's important to me because Jen started this amazing organization that really helps women figure out that there is an amazing career path out there for them. And professional organizing is an absolutely wonderful career path to help people. Enneagram 2 here. We're going to talk about this a lot, but helping people is what I do. And so we have created this community that gives education and inspiration to women who want to start and grow professional organizing businesses. So we've got some digital courses, we've got a podcast, we have this wonderful set of resources for women to realize they can go be professional organizers and start their own businesses and be entrepreneurs and do something different.
Before I hop over to Jen, I just want to say, because people that have listened to my show know, well, wait a second, you have this SBO partner program and you talk about what you do. And I want to just say for anybody out there, our businesses complement each other. They don't compete with each other. We have members, both of the SBO partner program, that are also members of Pro Organizer Studio, vice versa. We offer different things. Some things are similar, but there's other things that, like, where I focus in on one thing, they focus in on another. So it's not an either or, it's a both and for anyone listening out there. And I am always, if there's something that somebody comes to me that I don't provide, or I don't feel like I'm an expert in that specific area, and anyone that's worked with me will know that I will personally direct them over there, and they've done the same for me. So just to clarify, anybody that's listening out there going, wait a second, is that what you do? It's similar, like a similar industry. And at the end of the day, our core foundation is wanting to help other people, women specifically, help them succeed, follow their own path. And ultimately, none of us like clutter in this group. And we want to help people find organizing strategies and give knowledge to other women who want to then teach that to their clients.
And that's actually one of the reasons that Jen brought me on too, was I started working with her in late 2020. And I am extremely passionate about organizing as a business, which is what we do at Pro Organizer Studio, but I still have active clients. I was at a client yesterday. I still actively help people organize. And it's my passion to teach people how to be better organizers too. So not just the business piece, but also how do you actually go into someone's house and help them with all of this clutter that they are dealing with. So
absolutely. All right, Miss Jen.
That was a you're so sweet, Laurie. That was a fantastic intro. And I'm glad that I really wanted Melissa to kind of, lead that conversation. And it does, it really goes without saying that after, it's been 7 years coming on. I mean, gosh, I've lost track of the years where, Pro Organizer Studio started as a thought in my mind, and now it has become a thing with its own momentum that started to grow to the point where I needed somebody like Melissa who had a different skill set, different personality type. Like Laurie said, our businesses all complement each other really well, and we do have different ways of approaching the same problems because of our personality types. And so for me, like you guys, I connected with Laurie. I mean, really now it's been a while. Early on, when we first started podcasting with Pro Organizer Studio, I definitely reached out to her because she was well established and she knew what she was doing, and she was already talking to this audience in some way. And I absolutely love you, Laurie, like as a friend and as a person, but I never thought of it as competition. And that's so like part of your platform is collaboration over competition. So I just really appreciate you. And yes, I really appreciate Melissa too. we could dive into the history of everything that, everything that we have going on. But really Melissa is that person who I knew when people were asking for like, hey, teach me how to organize other people. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to, I want to make people feel confident and feel proud and feel ready to go out there, but I wasn't that right person. And Melissa, her addition to what we offer and being a host of our podcast has been the best thing that has ever really happened for our community and for its growth.
I think you bring up an interesting point, and we're going to really start to dive into the Enneagram in a minute, but what you just said is really, a product of your Enneagram type, understanding that. I have spoken at length with both Melissa and Jen about their Enneagram types and about what the work that I do. And we're going to let each one of them talk about their own type. But just to specifically for anybody that's listening, so Jen's an Enneagram 3, and Enneagram 3s, they're achievers. They're kind of big picture people. The devil's in the details, and that's not always the strength for an Enneagram 3. And again, I don't want to speak for her, but I'm married to a 3. She knows that. Josh is a 3. And so there's some amazing qualities. You're visionaries. 3s are visionaries, and that is amazing. But you need people on your team, in your camp, wherever you are, personally, professionally, that are going to balance that and counteract that, because in order to achieve those visions, you need those people that are going to be able to dot the I's, cross the T's, sit with the people that need to be sat with, because the 3 is like, I'm already on to the next, which is not a bad thing. It's just how you're wired. And so totally. I think it's interesting, this is who you were, and you knew where your strengths and where where you weren't as strong, and identified, hey, I need somebody that's going to fill this void that we have, because we know that this is important, and I'm not the woman for the job. So,
right.
But I also need a 3 to balance me, because I can be very much like, oh, you have a problem? Great. I'm ready to solve it. Just like vanilla ice, I guess. But like, I need that 3 to be like, here's the bigger picture, and here is the vision, and this is what we're going toward. And so it's a nice balance.
So on that note, Melissa, since you're an Enneagram 2, why don't you, in your words, just give kind of a top line overview, how you describe a 2 and what that looks like in your mind, and just to kind of give our people that are not Enneagram savvy some insight.
So the best description of an Enneagram 2 that I found on my very beloved platform, TikTok. There is some really good Enneagram content on TikTok that I get served up on my FYP. And I got this TikTok one day that said Enneagram 2 gets kidnapped. And it was a woman who was like, hey, kidnapper, we've been in the car for a long time. Are you hungry? I have a granola bar in my bag. Like, do you need to take a rest? I know this is probably very stressful for you. And so I saw that and I go, I feel seen and heard by this, because Enneagram 2 to me, and the way it manifests for me, is I am a helper and I am a giver. And I love doing that. So that's why I love the work that I do here. And that's why I love organizing, because I love that feeling of going into someone's home, and like at the beginning of the day yesterday, we had chaos, and at the end of the day, we had calm. And I love that feeling of giving that gift to someone else. And I love the feeling of giving the gift of, starting a business to someone. But the downside of being a 2 sometimes is you give so much that it takes a lot away from you as well. So you have to really check those boundaries of like, I'm always giving. And so when is the time for me to decompress or to not feel resentful about all the giving too? So I know that's kind of a deep one that we can get into.
Yeah. And we'll unpack it in a minute, because I obviously have follow-up questions. But Jen, I referenced obviously that you're an Enneagram 3. Do you want to just, in your own words, describe what a 3 means to you, Jen, or how it looks like in your world?
Oh, yeah. So first of all, Laurie gave me this question in advance, and I declined to do my homework properly enough, because I figured I could just show up and say something. It wasn't homework.
It's not. I told you, this is not a quiz. You're not passing, failing. It's
but listen,
a conversation.
But that is kind of what a 3 is about. It's like, I'm going to roll in and listen to what you guys are saying and play off of it and hope that what I say makes sense. I'm going to try to do my threes out there proud. So again, I'm not as in depth. Certainly, I mean, Laurie, I consider you like an expert in the Enneagram in my life. So, with that being said, and the fact that I haven't studied it as much as you have, my understanding is that the number types, because I really love like personality tests and everything. And what I understand about the Enneagram that's different is that the number types are not so much a personality descriptor, but that it kind of gets at like your core motivations and values and kind of how you show up for things. So my understanding of a three is that, yes, I like what you said, Laurie, about being a visionary. That makes a lot of sense. The motivation to perform in a sense, or and maybe you can actually help me elaborate on that, Laurie, because it's not that I'm motivated to perform in all situations, but that I like to be like Melissa said, I like to be that big picture person, kind of help people reframe a big problem. But when it comes down to like details and being like the chaperone of the field trip, that is not my strong suit, because when people, individually start needing things and asking for help, I like to really just sort of be the one who's helping guide the whole expedition. So when I think of performer, I don't think so much of the need like for attention necessarily, because I actually really prefer to be behind the scenes, but I do like to, I don't mind being the person who's like speaking on behalf, or, being willing to say some things that other people aren't willing to say. I think I have that sort of natural sort of confidence. And so I think if I can, continue using that, to like, for example, on a podcast, hosting a podcast ended up being a perfect medium for me that I would not have known, was such a good fit for my personality type.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll get a little bit more of the technical academic just to kind of fill in the gaps. But again, I think the best way, the best description comes from somebody that is that type. I could sit here and study and read and listen all the times. And I might have certain language just because I've been geeking out on this for the past 4 years.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what you're experiencing every day, right? From the inside and what's really going on. So as Melissa said, I'll just kind of top line on both of the types. So for our Enneagram 2s, they are known as the helper, and their core motivation in a nutshell is that their worth is tied to service of others. So their need, it's not that it's not genuine. Everything is genuine, but there's like an intrinsic need that I need to help you because that's part of why I'm here. This is part of why you like me. This is my purpose. I am here to help you. And again, there's a little bit of every Enneagram type in all of us. So it's just a matter of what is dominant, what's dominant for you. And that's one of the things when we look at the Enneagram, and I was just on somebody else's show talking about it, kind of giving an overview. And when you look at the model of the Enneagram, it's this circle with the triangle and all these crazy arrows, almost, like, what is this? And when you start to understand it, when you peel back the layers beyond just the number, you look at, oh, those arrows represent how the connection points are. So that even though your core number is a 2, the helper, you have connection points to all of these other types. And it's in what scenario of your life, what emotional state you're in, all of the different things of how you connect to those other points, right? So it's a fluid process, but your intrinsic core motivation is that need to help others, where Jen's as the 3 is the need for achievement and the need to, like you said, perform. It is not an inauthentic thing because, like I said, I've studied all the types and I'm married to a 3. And so there's certain types, whether it's myself or the people in my family, that just, of course, by default have become guinea pigs. And I've learned a lot that over the past several years of, oh, that's why he did that, or that's why, because it was really more of a representation of that, their type. And so the 3, their worth is tied to their work, how well I show up in the world. Like, my purpose is to bring value on a grander scale. And again, this is not from an egotistical standpoint. This is not necessarily, yeah, sure. If any number is unhealthy, they're going to do that. If a 2 is unhealthy, and they're going to be a martyr, and a 3 is going to be inauthentic. But most people are in that kind of average range where you're just going through life doing your thing. And so, the 3s, they're like, okay, I have this, like, Jen's like, I had this idea for Pro Organizer Studio, or you can make money doing this, and I'm going to figure out how I can share that with the world. And that's just a gift. And where certain types on the Enneagram, like our 1s who are perfectionists, might do our 1s and our 5s would do like tons of research and make sure every I is dotted, T's crossed. They had every single thing is air quote perfect before they put that out in the world. Jen's like, I'm just going to put it out in the world and see how people respond to it. And then we'll go from there, which is in some ways very similar to my type as an 8. And we, there's connection points between 3s and 8s. So I can relate to that. So I think for a 3, again, not to put words in your mouth, it's like, I have an idea. I think this can bring value. Let's just go. And people are drawn to 3s. They're charismatic people. And 3s have the innate ability to kind of like read a room. And so I think for people that's why a lot of 3s are leaders, they're CEOs, they're heads of, whether it's a head of a department or an industry or a business, because they aren't afraid to take risks. They are comfortable maybe stepping out of their comfort zone and speaking up, or maybe it's not out of their comfort zone to just come and say, hey, I'm going to share this with you. So I think that's what's great about it. But I want to talk about the clutter perspective and how, because again, what's interesting about our conversation is all 3 of us are in the organization space for a living. So we're kind of like not the typical person, because I want this to be something that can be used for somebody who doesn't do this for a living, who it doesn't have maybe the background that we do. So let's go back in time and talk about growing up. When you were a child, Melissa, like how would you say clutter and organization kind of manifested itself in your life?
I could talk about this. This could probably be your own like single focus podcast, a deep psychology of my background. But so I grew up, and I have a theory about people that I work with, organizing clients. And I believe that you either do exactly what you grew up with, or you do 180 degrees opposite. So, I mean, that's not like entirely true, but that's my general going in strategy. And so in my house, I grew up with a mom who was exceedingly organized. Everything was at right angles. There is nothing in my mom's house that she could not tell you immediately where it was. When my husband first went to my parents' house, he said, and this is accurate, I would eat a steak off of your mom's garage floor. Okay. Very clean and organized home. I rebelled against that very severely. So as a teenager, I had a room that you would like break your leg when you walked into, stuff everywhere. When I went to college, I had a messy dorm room. I had messy apartments. I then as an adult said, I'm taking this organization and I'm doing my own thing. And so it wasn't until I was 42 years old that I realized this is not an enjoyable way to live, actually, and totally reformed and became organized myself, and then started my organizing business to help other people who were like me, who had no idea how to do it. So that's the brief synopsis of I grew up with very, very organized home. And it wasn't until I was into my middle of my adulthood that I realized that was actually a great way to live. So, but I also did not go to the level of like, my home is not at the right angles, right? Like I enjoy having things around me. I like a little bit of clutter, but like decorative clutter, if that makes sense. So I do not live in a minimalist home, as you can probably see behind me, but I do realize the value of my brain being calmer with an organized home, being able to find what I need. I have realized that. And then I love to be able to help other people get there too.
Jennifer, that's perfect. That's like perfect description. Jen, let's talk about you.
Okay. So let's see. I wouldn't say there was anything that I was like heavily rebelling against, although I do have some clear memories of, just feeling like, I think I've just always been very sensitive to my environment. I mean, I know that for sure now, but as a child, I was probably experiencing some of those things and not really even knowing why. I know when I went into other people's houses, it was like, clean and organized and perfectly decorated. And I'm just like, I feel so good in here. I wish my own house was like this. And I do also have, some memories, and I was, I think, definitely not a completely disorganized child, but like certain memories of like realizing, for example, like the first time I like bought a paper planner, which at, whatever the generation I went through, they didn't force us to do that. And I was like I was like, oh, this just feels so good. I just like, it's so soothing just to see all these things. And so I didn't realize until later on, like I am very visual. I really have to have I really like having a lot of clear space. I like to see and organize plans and to-do lists and everything. I have to get it out of my head. And then another thing that sticks out is when I was in high school, my mom was moving. And so she had sort of done sort of like a DIY, sort of just decluttering and staging. It wasn't anything super professional, but I remember begging her. I was like, when we move to your new house, can we keep it like this? Because it was just like, all of that stuff was gone. And I was like, Mom, now it's perfect, And so just little things like that, I think. And I also really, had what I thought was a big passion for like actually decorating. And I never did go in that direction, but I just really always liked making environments feel good. So I think that that's kind of where my interest came from. And then now, I think like Melissa was saying, I just sort of over the years as an adult, have just realized how much it is really doing for me, like calming anxiety. I'm sure, I think you're going to get into this, Laurie, but I think actually, especially when my kids were a little bit younger than they are now, I think just organizing and getting rid of things was just kind of the only productive thing I felt like I could do, because every single day you're just trying to stay on top of chaos. And I was just like, oh, well, if I keep the chaos manageable, then I feel good. I'm not embarrassed to have people over to my house. Like and that's a 3 thing to even say that probably. But I just to me, it's like a non-negotiable. I'm like, I unfortunately am starting to realize that now I have a daughter who's rebelling against the way that I do things. And I'm like, okay, I'm like trying not to make it any worse,
Oh, I've told the story before. Both of my girls, when they were younger, would be like, I'm going to grow up and be a hoarder. Just like they
just to make you mad.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I'm like, okay, you do you. But while you're here, you can't, like I drew the line. I always allow my kids to have their room, their space be messy until it got to a point. I was like, it cannot be gray gardens. Like there's not going to be, we cannot have like feral animals in here because you've left bags of chips and milk and whatever, you know what I mean? Like, no. So like the food, if you are going to bring food, which I'm not a big fan of in the room, you have to like bring it out. Like we're not having dishes all over the place, but I have given them that space. And I will say now having 2 kids in college, 2 girls in college, they both, are like, they're adapting more of my habits now that they're on their own and responsible for their spaces than when they lived here. And even when they come home for break, like again, they're back to their slobby teenage ways. So, but I do think it's interesting how, and I'm curious because I don't, again, like just like organizing, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I do 100% agree with you, Melissa, in that you either adapt kind of the behavior that was modeled for you, or you say, yeah, I don't want that. And you go in a different direction. So I do think that there's so much of that that's truth. And so when I work with clients, and I'm sure you do too, and you see, I've worked with people where they say, oh, I wish my kids would, pick up their toys or make their bed or do this. And I look around the house and the rest of the house is in chaos. And I'm like, well, they're not being modeled that behavior. So it's hard enough to have buy-in when you are modeling that behavior. But if you're not modeling that as an adult, it's really hard to get kids to have that buy-in to do something that theoretically seems like a chore,
Absolutely. Well, I'm seeing a lot of clients now that acknowledge right away without me even having to dig into it, my mom did X and I see myself doing that and I don't want to go down that same path. Like my mom never, ever gets rid of anything. And I see myself doing that too. And I want your help in trying to figure out how to dial that back. So I think that we're starting to get a little better about recognizing some of these behaviors and talking about them too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And we're going to just take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about the different types of clutter and kind of what your Enneagram type has to do kind of with that physical clutter, emotional clutter, calendar clutter. So sit tight, folks. We will be right back. So a couple things. Jen mentioned before when she was talking about the anxiety piece. And this is something that I've talked a lot about offline. I've referenced it, on some previous shows, but it's worth reiterating. There's definitely an emotional response that certain Enneagram types from the people that I've spoken with have when they are surrounded by physical clutter, and threes are one of them. Every three, including my husband, and I know Jen and I have personally spoken about this, there is a feeling of stress and anxiety when you are in a space. And I think a lot of ones can relate to that as well, where you are around that space and it actually causes a visceral reaction. Like, I feel uncomfortable, I need to leave. Or I have I have a friend who's a one, she's a designer, and she's like, I get like short of breath if I go into a house that's like super cluttered. I feel like the walls are closing in. Can you just speak into that a little bit more?
Oh, yes. I mean, that sounds like such a surface level observation, but it's very, very deep to me. I feel and again, this is just me personally. It doesn't, like, going into somebody's home for a short period of time, whether that's a family member or, a client, that in itself doesn't bother me because I'm not feeling like a sense of ownership of whatever is happening. And I'm like, I'll be leaving at such and such a time. So it's not like I'm in your house, like having a panic attack. So I don't experience it that way. I'm sure other people who are even more sensitive than I am probably do, and would never think like, oh, let me go help somebody else organize their stuff. And I genuinely, like, in terms of helping clients, to me, it's like, hey, this doesn't overwhelm me because I can envision the end result. And I know that you can't. So I know that I was kind of like using that, some of those basic gifts, at the time that I started my organizing business, which was all the way back in 2014 now. Gosh, wait, 2013. I can't even, like I said, I can't remember the years anymore. 2014. Yes. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, I'm using my sort of low key OCD and my, sort of decorative skills. And I'm like, I made a business out of it. I was like, how cool is that? What if I could help other people do that? And yeah. And so for me, like, realizing and connecting the pieces of, I've got these skills. And if I just put myself, match myself up with some people who need that and want to pay for it and value it, then that's a business model. But again, what it comes down to though, is it gave me such like I got just as much satisfaction out of helping other people organize their stuff as I did organizing my own things and getting rid of things. That's really my favorite thing to do. It's like,
yeah, mine too. Mine too. Yeah.
But I want to back up though, because I recognize, like, there's the business answer, which is, we're talking about my professional experience and my skills. And then there's, like, on a personal level, what I experience, with loved ones, with family, with people that I can't just leave whenever I want to, people that you live with. It's not easy to communicate to another person how it's like, hey, I'm not just reacting because the room is a mess. Like, it's like, it's like if you came over to my house and I just blared loud music the whole time, and I'm like, well, what's wrong? Like, can't you just chill out and enjoy yourself? Like, that's how it feels when I'm in my own space. And again, that I mean, I wouldn't let it get that badly, but that's the level of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a sensory perception. That's the level that I feel it. And it's not even because I think people are judging me. I think it is literally just, I'm seeing all of these things that I need to deal with and I can't, or I haven't yet. And it just really piles on me psychologically, emotionally. So it's not, I mean, I will say it doesn't, it might've been a business that I could make, but it's not something that makes it very easy to be in a relationship with someone, for example, who doesn't feel that same way about the importance of environment. And listen, I know I've got a lifetime ahead of me that, this is always going to be a thing, because like our houses are like where our homes are. We're like where we're living life. And it's, that's why I think it's so important what you're doing, Laurie, is like, it's not just about like helping clients overcome it, but like, if we can just sort of like have these conversations with our families and just say like, hey, I'm not attacking you. Like, I'm just like letting you know, like this makes a huge, huge difference to me. And how I'm like functioning every day.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, because I have a client, I too, like Melissa, I have just a couple of clients to keep some skin in the game, but even though the majority of my work isn't one-on-one with clients anymore, but I have a client that I'd worked with for years before I learned the Enneagram. And I knew that, and they have 4 kids, and I know that the husband's got a very bold personality, and I like bold personality because I'm a direct person. And the wife's a 9 and he's a 3. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off. But I found that out later, once I learned the Enneagram, and I was like, did you ever do the Enneagram? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what's your type? Because you're not supposed to type people. And he's like, I'm a 3. I'm like, I knew it. And it was so true, because he gets crazy. Like his response is very like, just throw everything away, just get everything away. And she and his wife, who, we'll get to the Enneagram 9s later in the series. I say the 9s, for lack of a better word, are clutter blind. Like they're so chill and go with the flow. Like they're the people that can walk past a sink full of dishes and it not stress them out. Like which in some ways they're less tightly wound than some of the other types on the Enneagram, but you put that connection that somebody who's clutter blind and somebody who has this like nails on a chalkboard reaction when they see physical clutter out, and that causes relational conflicts. So it's not about the laundry. It's not about the dishes. It's not about the papers. It's about, oh my gosh, this lack of control, or this is stressing me out, or all of these other things. And I think that the language is what is so helpful, is understanding to be able to articulate it. Like you said, when you were a child, you didn't have the tools in your toolbox to articulate it. You just knew how you felt. And I think that's what's really important. Is what I'm trying to do is help people have language so that they know, and then they can articulate it, and also have some grace and empathy so that you could say, I get it, that this doesn't stress you out, but this is, like you said, this is how I feel.
And we know from what we do that, as professional organizers, you see a lot of relationship conflict, like, so I say I'm basically a marriage therapist, right? And a lot of that conflict comes from, it's his fault. No, it's her fault. It's their fault, whatever. And what you're saying is exactly right, is sometimes that tension isn't resolved by explaining why it bothers you. It's just that I see this and I go to level 11 angry, and we don't dial it back of like, it's not my fault that I feel this way. It's just my brain telling me this is a stressful situation and I'm trying to get out of it. But it causes so many other problems. It causes problems with your kids. It causes problems with your spouse. It causes problems with so many other things, because you're exactly right. We don't use the right words to describe why it's bothering us.
No, absolutely. So I'm curious. Oh, go ahead. Yes, Miss Jen.
I'm raising my hand.
Yes, I know, you're so good.
Laurie, I have an idea for your next
book. Gosh. Just wait, can I just sidebar?
Can I sidebar planning your future?
Wait, I'm going to sidebar for 1 second, because I have an Enneagram and Clutter course because of Jen Kilbourne Obermeyer.
Yeah.
Oh.
I never wanted to get into the digital course world at all. I'm all about running to write a book. And she's like, you need to make this a course. Yeah. So I will just tell you, that is her.
She's always right too, by the way, unfortunately.
Oh my God. That is so sweet.
That's true.
Anyway, go ahead. So what's your next
I know.
plan for my life?
Here's what you're doing with your work, Laurie.
Okay.
So I think that eventually you could, sort of develop like a matchmaking service, because you understand Enneagram so well and how people like to live. And I'm just like, hey, you might find them.
We're going to do a dating app based on your Enneagram type.
Yes.
Ooh.
That's
Seriously,
great idea.
listen,
You heard it here first, people.
This is how my brain works. I'm like, relationships are all fine and good when you're just dating, but then you're trying to figure out if this is somebody that you can live with. That requires its own matchmaking, and it hadn't done anything to do with your pictures and whether you like dogs and how many kids you have. Like, oh my gosh, like, please. Okay. Anyway, I just think that, like, Laurie, you really do have the in-depth, like, understanding of how these things work and how you can coach people how to say what they're feeling instead of acting it out. And so I know Melissa was joking about being a marriage therapist, but like that idea really does have some potential, because it's like, before you get too deeply attached and involved with this person, like, let's find out if you guys are actually going to kill each other in 5 years, like, with 99% accuracy.
Well, what's funny? Go ahead, Melissa. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I you can take this out if you want to, but I will tell you that the best example of this, if you are a pop culture person and you have watched the second season of Love is Blind, there is a couple.
So what channel is that on? I don't even heard of that.
Netflix well, your listeners will have heard of it. I promise. So there's this couple on Love is Blind. They've never seen each other, but they get engaged, and they're going to each other's apartments. And this one guy, I go, there are red flags all over this. The guy's like, you have a drum set? And the girl's like, yeah. And it's in my living room and I want to keep it. And they're trying to negotiate like what stuff comes into the other person's house. And it was like a master class in marital communication about clutter and stuff and things. And it's a big deal. Jen is absolutely correct.
There you go. So guys, I thought we could cram this all into one episode, but I was wrong. Make sure that you tune in next week for part 2 of my conversation with Melissa and Jen from Pro Organizer Studio as we continue our conversation about the Enneagram and clutter. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love by sharing it with your friends. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so that you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth a listen. Head on over to YouTube and make sure that you follow us there as well. We record interviews, videos, and conversations with all of our guests. And again, if you want to learn more about our product offerings, feel free to visit us at simplybeorganized.com, where you can connect with